This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean, and you can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean. Today we are here to talk about the week that was in the NFL and college football. Big week for both leagues, I guess. You don't call it. It's not a league for NCAA, but big week nonetheless. I'm here with Kyron Samuels, former All-Pro, All-AFL offensive lineman, and of course D1 as well at Jacksonville State. And we are going to recap some games. So we got 5 games to talk about from the NFL. Then we're going to bring in Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus to give us a college football update. And then finally, we will have Lawrence Owen of Colts Law and BLEAV in Colts today because it did not work out yesterday. And he's going to help us preview the Monday night game between the Steelers and Colts. So, Kyron, how you doing today, man?
Doing pretty good, man. Excited to get into it.
Some big games to talk about, some tight games, some that I didn't necessarily expect to be as fun as they were. The first thing that we're going to do just to take a look at everything here is our updated playoff picture. So let's look at that real quick here. Not too terribly much has changed. The Dolphins are once again the number 2 seed after their win. That puts them back over the Bills with the AFC East, and they hold the tiebreaker with them, so it's very tight at the moment. The Jets maintain their lead over the Patriots after they lost on Thanksgiving, and the Jets won yesterday. Aside from that, not too terribly much has changed, although the Chargers are now neck and neck with the Patriots because they won yesterday as well. In the NFC, the Eagles maintain their lead. Oh, that should be 10-1, slightly behind there. And then the 49ers have solidified their lead in the NFC West, now at 7-4. Buccaneers lost, but they maintain their lead in the NFC South. Cowboys, Giants, that's the same, but the Commanders, their win yesterday puts them comfortably in the final NFC wildcard spot, with the Seahawks trailing by about a game and the Falcons and Lions in the back. And so just below that, we have what the playoff matchups would be if the season ended today. And then I will also take a quick look at the updated draft order. Texans still at number 1, but the Bears lost to the Jets, popped them up all the way into the 2nd overall pick. Now, that may not last, but that either puts them in prime position to draft a pass rusher or potentially get a slew of picks from a team who wants to move up and draft one of the top quarterbacks. So just keeping an eye on that. The Texans look pretty terrible. We're not going to recap their game this week. We will briefly comment on the Dolphins side of things at some point. But the Texans are pretty much locked into that top pick at this point. So the conversation about which quarterback that's going to be will start to heat up for us. And then we have the Lions, who have the Rams pick at 3. They also might be looking at a quarterback. And then the Seahawks will also be in prime position to take an awesome player at number 4 if this stands as well, because they hold the Broncos pick. So that's just a quick look at what we've got going on in terms of both the playoff race and the race for the number 1 pick. And now let's get into it. So I think the first game that we should talk about today would be the Buccaneers versus the Cleveland Browns. Now, you know what? This game was definitely one that it was slightly surprising, not shocking. It wasn't the outcome that I expected, but we are kind of tricking ourselves into the Buccaneers. Now, Tom Brady's Tom Brady. He will always be Tom Brady, probably for the rest of the time. But the team as it stands is just not as complete as we've seen it the past couple of years. The offensive line continues to be just okay, and that's probably not enough to get it done in the long term. Get to the playoffs, maybe they make a run, but it just seems like any significant pass rush is going to be trouble for them. And the Browns kind of did what they believe that their key to winning is. run the ball, have quality play from Jacoby Brissett, nothing crazy, and rely on playmakers. So I think the defense was a little better this week than it had been in for a while. And ultimately, the Browns do win it in overtime. So, Kyron, go ahead and give me your thoughts on this game while I pull something up here.
Well, I thought it was one of the better games for the Buccaneers all year until the last 5 minutes of the game. They gave up 10 points in the first quarter, and then really settled into the game defensively for really the last 2.5 quarters. They played excellent defensively, didn't give up much of anything. But one thing I will say, I forget the Browns punter's name, but he was instrumental in them turning that around and finishing that game out yesterday because he flipped the field seriously. So in those inclement weather, it was a little rainy, it's wet out there, it's cold. Not ideal, situations to put an offense in. And it's a situation where you would have to lean heavy on your run game towards the end of the game. And that's where we saw the better team that had the better offensive line and the better run game end up pulling it out. But they did so because they had short fields the entire fourth quarter. And the Buccaneers were doing a great job of getting off the field on third downs. I'm pulling it up here. Third down efficiency. The Browns were 5 for 17 on third down. The Bucs did a really good job getting off the field on third downs. But when you have such a short field, you've been on the field all game, guys are tired, and the Browns' offensive line and run game is really good. You start to see them wear down a little bit, and that's where you start to see them kind of get down there. And even then, last play of the not last play, but second to last play of regulation was fourth down. The Buccaneers had made the stops. They got them to exactly where they want them. Jacoby Brissett made a pretty good throw, but Njoku just made an incredible one-hand catch around 3 Buccaneers defenders. I don't feel as bad about that game as I see a lot of people talking about. The Browns have been a solid football team all year. They've been in almost every game that they've played. Now they're still hovering around there. They have a little bit of hope, especially with Deshaun Watson coming back this week. But they're not a bad football team. So I thought Buccaneers played pretty dang well to that last bit, and I don't really blame the defense. I see the defense get a lot of flack for that. It's the NFL, man. You're playing against one of the best running backs, one of the best offensive lines. It's hard to keep people out of the end zone on those short fields that many times. So, yeah, you got it right, Noah. So, it's hard to keep people out of the end zone that many times. I thought the passing offense looked the best it looked for the Bucs maybe all year, as efficient and as they had a lot of intermediate and deep throws. The only thing that was weird about the Bucs offense to me was Mike Evans was a little bit off yesterday. There's a couple balls that Brady had in his vicinity. Like normally he reaches out for those balls and catches those balls, maybe dives and catches those balls, where he wasn't even making the effort in the attempt to corral those balls. He had 9 targets and only had 2 catches for 31 yards, and one of them was a 28-yarder. So other than that 28-yarder, he was really rendered ineffective totally. And that's Brady's number one guy. So it was very weird to see that. But other than that, I mean, it's the same old Bucs offense that you got. Rashad White had 14 carries for 64 yards, which is an improvement on what it has been for in the past. The problem is you don't have any Leonard Fournette, and they really missed him because we have both of those guys. It opens up the offense a little bit more because he's able to do some receiving out of the backfield. He's able to do a little bit more in those short yardage situations. But like I said, not panicking on the Bucs at all. Played a pretty dang good game till the end. Got to have better field position situations. You can't go 80, 90 yards every drive in the NFL and score points. And conversely, you can't stop people when they're getting the ball on their 50-yard line or their 40-yard line. So strange game, strange ending. But I think both teams should feel pretty decent about where they're at right now, especially the Browns with Deshaun Watson coming back.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that we could talk about here in a second. It was just little things here and there that ultimately did swing the game in the favor of the Browns. I mean, in overtime, that hands to the face penalty by Donovan Smith was killer because they had just advanced the ball on that play that set them back, and then they ended up having to punt, just kind of killed the drive. And they did have another opportunity, but gave up a sack and had to punt again. And then, of course, the game-winning drive for the Browns in overtime relied on 2 huge plays to Amari Cooper, and then it was capped off by the touchdown run by Nick Chubb. So little things here and there. Like you said, that was a beautiful touchdown by Njoku. You know what I mean? There's only so much you can do, I guess, if you're the Bucs in that situation. But if you're the Browns, this is kind of a must-win game at this point. And, I mean, we saw how far back they are in that playoff picture. Now, it's not mathematically out of the realm of possibility, but that is going to be really tough for them to turn things around, even with Deshaun Watson coming back. And I mean, he's coming back basically cold at this point. So, I mean, how much of an impact do you think he can make after not playing football for that length of time to come in partway through the season? And what would chemistry be like with him and his receivers?
Well, I think he'll be fine. I think he's that talented of a player. I think it's that talented of a roster already. The offense hasn't been really the big issue for the Browns this year. It's been stopping the run game and then giving up explosive plays in the passing game with blown coverages. So if the floor was high with this offense with Jacoby Brissett, I think even if you get Deshaun Watson back at 80% of what he was playing, the floor of that team significantly increases. And maybe they'll be able. Jacoby Brissett played fine, but with Deshaun Watson, if he plays, like I said, 80% of his capacity, it helps the defense out because they're going to be on the field more just because drives are going to be sustained longer. It gives you more ability to open it up early in early downs and not have to lean so heavily on the running game when you don't have to. I think he'll be fine, man. And the great thing about it for him is they come back against the Texans, so it's not like it's going to be that tough of a game to get your rhythm back against. Those guys are. I don't want to just disrespect them and say they're just actively tanking. I just don't think they're that good of a football team right now. I think they're solid in some areas. They have some very good players that clearly flash when that team plays. You see those guys make plays. Watching Damian Pierce play, watching Stingley and Jalen Petrie play, even Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins. They have some very nice pieces. Watching those bookend tackles, they have one of the best tackle duos in the NFL. And Titus Howard, and in my opinion, he should be a first team All Pro this year, and Larry Tunsil. So they have good players, but they're just not good enough all around yet. And I think that'll be the perfect team to come back against if you're trying to establish some rhythm, if you're trying to get back into the groove of things. And I think it's like riding a bike for the most part, man. As long as you're healthy and you know the offense, his arm talent hasn't gone away. His ability to extend foot plays hasn't gone away. As long as he knows the offense, and I think that might be actually, I don't want to say the time off was beneficial, but the extra time to learn the playbook, to actually know the offense, to get a grip of what you're doing. And he's been practicing. I know that since he's been back, he's been taking a significant amount of the practice reps with the
Mm-hmm.
ones. So it's not like he's coming in just completely off, but I think he's going to be fine, man. I truly do. And I think the floor of that team and that offense is extremely high because we saw with Jacoby Brissett. So I'm excited to see him get back in there and rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that they can be a better team. It just seems like a long way to go to be down 3. You know what I mean? They're down 3 games at this point versus the last place wild card in the AFC. You know what I mean? So like they might, and they don't even have a tiebreaker over the Jets because they lost head to head earlier. So they would probably have to win some games against at least a game against the Bengals and quite a few to get in there. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is an uphill battle. And then let's go ahead and move on to our next game of the day, which is going to be the Baltimore Ravens at the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was this game, man. I can't remember. Would this have been the record, the NFL record for made field goal? What? Because he already
it would have
holds
been the
it,
record.
doesn't he?
Yeah. He
Would,
holds the record at 65.
That's right.
And that was from 67. A
Mm-hmm.
little closer to 68. And I tweeted out yesterday, but it's funny because everybody thinks he's so good that nobody expected to miss that. We're like, yeah, Justin Tucker will make that improbable field goal that nobody's ever made before. Like, we're like, yeah, throw him out there, he'll get it. But
It was really rainy too, wasn't it? Like kind
yeah,
of wet.
well, there had been the weather delay, so yeah, it had been a wet field all day, and it's funny because he hit it exactly where it needed to go. It just didn't quite have enough leg, but it was lined up dead center, exactly where you want that ball to be, man. So it was funny. Just watching the reactions, everybody was more surprised that he didn't make it than the fact that that he didn't make it. So it was funny, like watching that, and you see that. We'll talk about that as we get into this, but there's no two players that carry more load for their team than Justin Tucker and Lamar Jackson. And
I agree.
it's just very, very, very tough for those two guys because Lamar is doing everything for this team. I believe he's right outside the top 10 in rushing now.
Yeah.
He was
he's cleared 700 yards already this season or something.
Yeah. So sorry, he's actually 9th in rushing now. So he's he had 14 carries for 89 yards yesterday. And then he went 16 for 32 with a lot of drops. Very, very, very uncharacteristic game for Mark Andrews. He dropped 2 touchdowns. Gimme balls. DeMarcus Robinson dropped some very open passes. He had 4 targets and only 1 catch. But the other, I know 2 of those were large gains down the field. He just flat out dropped. Very tough sledding for him, Lamar. That is, he's not getting a ton of help right now, and he's actually protecting the ball pretty well. He protected the ball well yesterday. Tough for him because he's moving the ball and they're not able to finish drives because one, Greg Roman needs a little bit of flack because some of these play calls in these situations are absolutely haywire. There's no reason for this. So he deserves a little bit of blame, but a lot of it is just guys not making plays, man. And that's just simply because they don't have the guys outside of Lamar. And then, they have a stable of running backs when they can keep them healthy. But Ronnie Stanley going down definitely hurt them as well. They're just a banged up team right now. And Lamar still finding ways to put them in positions to win. I mean, he scored 15 fourth quarter points. They went to the fourth quarter with a 2-point lead. At 3 different times in that quarter, they took the lead. Lamar led the offense down, and he scored a touchdown and got them in field goal range, and retook the lead for that team. At some point, your defense has to help you out, man. Like, you can't give up a 2-minute drill to score right there at the end against the Jags, and you cannot give up that 2-point play. I just feel it's funny, like, the Ravens should legitimately, and you can't say should, but the Ravens have legitimately had a chance to win every single football game. And in most realistic scenarios, they win those football games. It's just absolutely insane how they found a way to lose the games that they have. They should probably be 11-0 right now, man.
There are a number of things that, again, similarly in this game where just one of them needed to go differently, and this would have been a different game. One, Gus Edwards, don't fumble inside your own 20.
Yeah,
That's
man.
one. 2, you have 4 trips into the red zone and you come away with 0 touchdowns. At least just one time. And I know you mentioned already that Mark Andrews had drops, which was part of that. But score at least 1 touchdown in one of those. And once again, this is probably not a lost game for you.
Right.
Don't drop balls by Mark Andrews. That's obviously a big one as well. I mean, any one of those things would probably have changed the nature of this game, and you just needed one of them to go right. With the biggest one to me, obviously turning the ball over on a short field is bad, but not a single touchdown in the red zone in their first 4 appearances there. I mean, that offensively just doesn't get it done. So I hear you, defense got to help them out, but this is not a lockdown defense right now, and if you're gonna consistently score field goals, you really need that kind of lockdown defense. So I think I hear you, but I would call that out a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to be more efficient in the red zone. And I think a lot of that has to do with what I said earlier about Greg Roman. He needs a little bit of the flack. Some of these calls in these situations are just, and it's a lot of times on third down, on the money downs, where you need to dial up something nice. You need to, create matchup mismatches. But I don't think that they have the guys other than Mark Andrews that can really do that for them. So I'm giving him flag because that's his job to figure it out regardless. But it's a tough situation for him as well because, I mean, the leading receiver yesterday was Josh Oliver, I believe, who's a 3rd-round pick from 3 years ago. I mean, Deshaun Jackson was the second leading receiver. Like,
yeah.
It's
pretty much off one play, though.
I mean, right. So it's 62-yarder he had. I mean, it's very tough to draw things up with those guys. But like I said, it is his job to do so. So, like I said, man, I got to give Lamar his proper credit because, God, I mean, nobody has to do more for his team to win than that guy. But then on the other hand, we got to give, the Jags offense some credit. I don't think the defense played very well at all. But the Jags offense found ways. And like you said, they got helped out by the Gus Edwards fumble at the end. But that last go-ahead drive to get in position to take that 2-point to then win the game, absolutely stellar performances. Zay Jones and Christian Kirk made some incredible catches. Like, those guys have, morphed into, like, very solid players. You saw flashes from them, more specifically Kirk when he was in Arizona. But a lot of people gave the Jags front office hell for going to get those guys this offseason and paying them what they did. And I mean, they're sitting here 4-7. It's not like they've had a great year, but those guys have had pretty dang good years. And you see the clear jump in Trevor Lawrence's performance because of that. I mean, Trevor Lawrence hasn't had a great year by any means. He's just very solid and improving. If you look at his numbers, I mean, he's very similar to Jimmy G, which is funny. Like, you look at the differences in the talent and the supporting cast. So you probably give Trevor a little bit more.
Well, he
Probably
can
getting a
certainly
little more
do some
credit.
more things. He can do more things for sure, and you see it periodically. But like, I think maybe the efficiency isn't there. Uh, For him, it's been like red zone turnovers. That's been a big reason why they've
Correct.
lost games because like they move the ball and then they can't close out. I mean, that's been kind of a consistent storyline around the league.
Hmm.
But um,
And
but
even
yeah,
like
no, I hear what you're saying.
yeah, even some of the I was watching that game closely because um, I just like the matchups like that because I like the matchups that people don't think are going to be good games necessarily, or people aren't necessarily checking for. Those typically turn out to be really good games because it's the NFL and anything can happen. But even just some of those drives, right? He went 29 for 37. The difference between being a good quarterback that has a good game and flashes and then goes back to, um, maybe a not so hot game and throw a pick or two here is the consistency in the intermediate throws in between the 20s. And he
Hmm.
missed like 3 or 4 throws, just flat out misses that would have kept drives going, that may have kept them on the field and maybe extended the scoring drive, or maybe kept them on the field and just gave their defense enough of a break and kept Lamar Jackson off the field. He's just missing a little bit of those throws. And if he can get those down and be more consistent with those throws, you go from a good quarterback, good young quarterback with a lot of tools and flashing to one of the best in the game. That's the difference between him and then the elite guys right now. But like I said, man, they didn't have much of any running game yesterday. I mean, they had 20 rushes for 38 yards. So very, very poor day in the run game yesterday. So much credit to them for finding a way to win, man, because uh, they got some opportunistic, things to go their way, but they still had to go the length of the field and score and then get a 2-point conversion there in less than 2 minutes. So huge shout out to them.
Yeah, they did a nice job in the final drive. It is a weird box score if you look. I mean, Jermichael Hasty with 12 carries for 28 yards. He was hot in the receiving game, but he wasn't really doing much rushing at all. But then you look at Travis Etienne, and I guess maybe he's a little banged up or something because they gave him 2 attempts. That's it in the rushing, and it doesn't look like he was targeted even once in the passing. And I remember him not being really a factor in any way whatsoever. He totaled 3 yards of offense, and I think that was probably missing from their game in throughout. But the final drive was pretty big time. I do have to point out that he did almost fumble the game away. So he fumbled on basically, I think the first drop back of that drive, but it was recovered by Luke Fortner, their young center, and basically he just responded really well after that. Marvin Jones got involved for the first time all game, including the really, really nice touchdown at the very end. Zay Jones, he was involved all game, but had some really big plays, including probably the biggest one down the left sideline. And he closed out with 145 yards. And then Jermichael Hasty, again, better in the passing game than the rush game with 67 yards. So it's just a weird box score when you look at it, like who you expect to be the main contributors there. Even Christian Kirk was probably like the third to fourth most important player in this game. But ultimately, they get it done. We will always remember the Jacksonville Jaguars mascot in the Speedo as Justin Tucker's trying to kick that field goal. But all right, man. Anything else you want to say on that game before we move along to a key playoff matchup?
Nothing, man. Other than get Lamar some help, man. Just get him help. Get him some help. This is ridiculous by now. Like
Yeah.
you can't keep wasting these windows because they have a Super Bowl caliber um, nucleus, but you need some people to push you over the edge. They kind of remind me of the Rams before they got Odell and Von Miller last year. They were a good team, hovering around being a really great team. You need the kick in the butt. You need the talent to take you to the next level on both sides of the ball. I think they're
Hmm.
a corner away and a receiver away. The run game is fine. When the offensive line is healthy, they run the ball as well as anybody, especially with the ball. Get him another receiver and let them really make a viable push because the windows are very short in this league.
Yeah. And their key offseason or their key midseason addition, Roquan Smith, I didn't notice him being particularly impactful in this game, but maybe that's something that I need to see on all 22, but it just didn't seem like he popped today or yesterday. All right. So we have the Cincinnati Bengals and the Tennessee Titans. Now, as it stands, these teams are also currently slated to be the first round matchup in the wild card round. In this game, the Cincinnati Bengals came out on top. Their offensive firepower overcame the Titans' defensive ability. I will say that the Bengals had a solid defensive performance too, but again, we are looking at a Titans team that doesn't have the greatest offensive weaponry. Ryan Tannehill managed to throw for 291 yards, but he didn't score through the air. There were no rushing touchdowns. So, that's a good day overall. I'll give up 291 yards passing with no offensive touchdowns scored. So, Derrick Henry, he got his, I will say it's not no offensive touchdown scored because it was a weird one to Treylon Burks because it was a fumble and then he advanced it into the end zone. But aside from that, I will chalk that up as a good day for the Bengals defense. Anybody that you want to shout out in particular for this game?
Not necessarily. I just would like to give a shout out to the Bengals offensive line. They're one of the most maligned offensive linemen in the league, right or wrong. I think a lot of it, and Joe Burrow's come out and flat out said it, that a lot of the sacks that he takes is on him. He holds on to the ball, and he's very, very meticulous about getting everything out of the play. So he doesn't give up on plays as much as a lot of other guys. And then sometimes they just flat out get beat, right? But they only gave up a sack yesterday, one sack, to arguably the best front seven in football right now, or no debate, one of the best. So it was very good to see them kind of respond a little bit and play well. But other than that, you just got to shout out the entire Bengals defense. They played extremely well. I'm seeing too many people just say, "Oh, Burrow," and I'm like, give him his credit. He played well enough to win. But that defense, man, is not getting nearly enough love. When you have a performance like this, even if it's against a team with their clear deficiencies like the Titans offense, not many people have held Derrick Henry to 38 yards on 17 carries. They did a phenomenal job bottling him up. And like we said, they don't really have the weapons on the outside yet to really threaten you. Treylon Burks has some pretty big plays. He's definitely coming along, but he's one guy. Robert Woods is proving that he's a solid pro, but coming off the knee injuries and the change of scenery and just age, wear and tear, he's not the guy that he once was. So they don't really have the threats to really concern you outside. They did a very good job of bottling Henry up. And it was just a very interesting day, just weather-wise everywhere. I feel like you kind of saw it rear its head a little bit. It was just wet, rainy, cold, muggy. We're getting to that time of the year, so those games favor teams with good defenses that can bow up and just be tough when you need them to be. And the Bengals are showing that they can do that. I mean, other than the game last week against the Steelers, they played really, really well. They gave up only 19 points to the Ravens, 17 points to the Falcons, 13 to the 21 to the Panthers, and that was a late score on that game. They played pretty well this stretch of the season where Chase went out and they've gone on a little streak. I think they won 3 in a row here. The defense has played particularly well over the last month and a half of the season, so give them a lot of credit. And the Titans are the Titans. They're tough. They're hard-nosed. They're going to be in every game they play. They're going to find ways to win games they shouldn't win. And they may lose one like this to a good team that just has a little bit more than they do, but Vrabel is doing one of the best jobs I've seen in a long time this year, especially with how handcuffed this offense has been, even with Ryan Tannehill. So for them to be sitting at 7-4, top of the division, and probably be hosting a playoff game, regardless of the outcome of this game, is a testament to him and his staff and how they run things in Nashville. So that's my only takeaway from that game. Two very evenly matched teams. One just had a little bit more firepower on offense. T. Higgins had a hell of a game. T. Higgins was probably the difference in this game. So give them credit for sure. And I don't really have too much of a take on this game other than the fact that these are two well-coached teams. These are two teams that are going to see each other again in the playoffs probably. And I'm excited to see that matchup because it turned into a little bit of a rivalry. We had the playoff game last year, and this game was very heated. I don't know if you saw the video of Karras screaming at the fans when he's running out of the tunnel. He's saying "F you," like he's like he just won the Super Bowl. So obviously these games means a lot. It means a lot to the Bengals and obviously the Titans as well. I mean, they were very emotional after the game. You don't really see those guys too emotional. So that's my only takeaway. I hope we get to see it again in the playoffs.
I wouldn't be surprised at all because it does. Now, certainly the Bengals could take lead of that division. I believe that they're now tied with the Ravens. I think the Ravens hold the tiebreaker.
Yeah, the Ravens are up 2 games in the division. So as long as they don't just completely crap the bed, they'll be fine as far as tiebreakers go.
Well, we shall see because they're going to have to play again head-to-head. So if the Bengals keep winning and the Ravens keep winning, then someone's going to have to fold at some point, and I don't think they've played both of their games against each other yet. But either way, if the Bengals do take a wild card spot, it's most likely going to come up against the Titans at some point. And, a lot of people don't really think about it like this, but Nashville and Cincinnati are not far away from each other. There is a natural rivalry between those cities as well, because Cincinnati's on the south side of Ohio, and they're basically, a straight line. I mean, not necessarily north to south, like exactly, but if you look at the country perspective, they're not far away at all. So there's a natural rivalry, just location wise, and I think that it's a fun matchup. The Bengals are one of the more well-balanced teams that we have in the NFL right now, because most of the teams who have at least one really good unit are lacking in some way, shape, or form at their other unit. A lot of our best defenses have somewhat lackluster offenses, or best offenses are kind of pulling along some middling defenses. The Bengals are, I think, the only team that falls in top 10 DVOA for both offense and defense. I think that's still the case after their game yesterday. So, take that for what you will, but they're the only team that has it. And I think if you watch the game, it basically tells the same story. All right. This is a game that I didn't expect to turn into the shootout that it was. The Las Vegas Raiders and the Seattle Seahawks. So I know you're a big Josh Jacobs stan. He obviously had a big game. I think you got to give him credit right off the bat. I mean, he won the game for them in overtime. That doesn't even include all that he did for them in regulation. I mean, I don't really think you can go anywhere without talking about this game, like without him specifically. I mean, what was his yardage total, including overtime? He had like over 300 yards of offense or something ridiculous. I mean, I'll let you sound off on him, man, because you've been calling his number for a long time.
All right, it's actually funny because I'm actually not going to give him too much credit. It's like this is what I expect from him if you give him the ball 39 times in a game. If you let a guy like that touch the ball 39 times in a game, he didn't do anything absolutely insane as far as averages wise, is what I'm saying. I'm more impressed with the offensive line of that team. As beat up and as hurt as they've been, for them to be able to lead the way for him to do that, because he was running through some nice holes there. Yards after contact was definitely very good for him. He had 6 catches for 74 yards too. But I was I left the game, and it's funny to say that because it's like I left the game more impressed with the offensive line and then Derek Carr for responding how he did after those 2 terrible interceptions. I mean, just terrible interceptions. Stuff that normally guys fall in the can for and you don't see them bounce back. The second, third, and fourth quarter, he played as good a football as I've ever seen him play. He finished the game 25 of 36 with 3 touchdowns and those 2 interceptions that happened early. I was so impressed with just the fact that that team responded. They don't really have anything to play for. They're not making the playoffs. That probably actually would benefit from tanking and I hate because that's just like GM brain talk, but like football talk, you want to win every game you play, right? But it would benefit the organization more if they didn't win, and they just played so tough against a team that's been very good all year. They held Kenneth Walker to only 26 yards on 14 carries defensively. Josh Jacobs, man, he just did what Josh Jacobs does. If you look over the course of his career, he's I think somebody tweeted out ESPN yesterday. He's now and it's only 11 games into this year, but he's only the 7th player to surpass 1,200 scrimmage yards in his first 4 seasons. So, and that includes some wide receivers that have had some significant stuff in the run game, like Deebo Samuel. Some guys like that have had games like that. I mean, years like that. But so that's why I said I wasn't necessarily too shocked with it. That's what happens when you give a kid like that the ball 39 times a game. I mean, and he actually touched the ball more because a couple runs were called back due to penalties. So when you give a guy like that the ball that much, that's what happens. If you look over the course of his career, this is what he's done. I think it's not sustainable at all. I don't think you can count on giving this dude the ball 40 plus times a game. That's ridiculous.
No way.
I mean,
no
there's
way.
no way it can happen. But this is one of those games that at the end of his career, whenever that is, you'll look back and say, that's what Josh Jacobs was. That's what he was able to do. And it just sucks that he's doing it on the 4-17 that nobody cares about. And
far cry from giving him the ball in the Hall of Fame game.
Right. But he's sitting there. He's leading the NFL in rushing yards now. He's third in attempts,
Yeah.
first in rushing yards.
He had half a
He's
season's worth of rushing in a game.
right. He had he has 9 touchdowns. Let me see his receiving stats. I mean, he's sitting there with also 325 yards receiving in the receiving game as well. I mean, he's already at 1,400 scrimmage yards, and it's only week 11. He's playing like a guy that wants his money and is saying, like, give me my money. I don't think that I would resign with them if I was him. They didn't sign you. They declined your option. Now you have the ability to go do what you want to do now and go get paid from either a contender. So you're telling me that a team like the Baltimore Ravens couldn't use a Josh Jacobs to put in that offense with Lamar Jackson? You're telling me a team like the Miami Dolphins, I know they got Jeff Wilson, but you're telling me the Dolphins couldn't use a Josh Jacobs and have some flexibility to get a guy like that? I could keep naming teams. The Bills, you don't think the Bills would pony up some money to go get a Josh Jacobs? I mean, he's going to have his choice to do whatever he wants to do here in this offseason.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, with the way that he's performed, I would be pretty shocked if they don't put the franchise tag on him. And the running back position it's too easy to franchise because it's a relatively low contract as far as franchise tags are concerned. So I hear you, but he's probably going to get locked in. And yeah, maybe he can not sign it and try and get traded, but that does limit your options a lot versus just being an unrestricted free agent. So even though his option was declined, they still certainly have their own options remaining. I think this is a team where tanking doesn't really benefit you the same way that a lot of others do. I mean, Derek Carr is good enough that it's like if you are tank with him, you're going to trade him away and you're going to start over with a rookie quarterback. And then who knows what the timeline on that is. And you got kind of an older roster as it is already, at some of the key positions. I mean, I think they're probably locked into Chandler Jones for at least one more year. Max Crosby certainly not old, but Devontae Adams is a bit older and they're locked into that contract. And some of the other ones too. So it's like they're a team that's primed to compete, at least from a roster standpoint. So what does getting that higher pick really do for you? Yeah, maybe there's a slightly better defensive player available, but if you're not making the playoffs, there's going to be somebody who can help your team available. And maybe you just want to go offensive line. You know what I mean? Maybe you just go offensive line and find a defensive tackle in the second round, and they can both be role players for you quickly. Yep. But what else does tanking do for you? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not a team that is really well suited to benefit from that. So winning games does a lot more for them as an organization and a team than losing games does, in my opinion. All right. So from the Seahawks perspective, Geno Smith continues, putting up stats, with 328 yards for 2 touchdowns and a pick. Kenneth Walker, this is the thing. Like, I think he can be really good situationally. I think there's maybe some overstatement on how good he is as a player, because I think truly elite running backs, you have a hard time stuffing them for 14 carries for 26 yards. Sure, he did have 2 touchdowns, but that's not necessarily the impact on the game that you expect from a top-tier back. So this is kind of something I've been saying for a minute. I don't know if you necessarily agree with me, but, I've been a little hesitant on him. There's a lot of rookie of the year chatter, like right off the bat, as soon as he kind of broke out. But a lot of what we saw in those first weeks were some good plays, but a lot of taking what was given and just being a little more explosive than people expected, because he didn't necessarily have the same 40 time coming out of college that a guy like Breece Hall did. So seeing him explode and have a high miles per hour, tracker, people got hyped about that. But I don't see him as a big time difference making running back. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I do. I think he'll be fine. I just think they had a tough game yesterday.
I think Raiders, he'll be fine. That's just my opinion on who he is as a guy.
He can be a 1,000. I'll say he's going to get to 1,000 yards this year. I mean, they have 6 games left, I believe. It's 11 games left, so 6 games left. He's going to go over 1,000 yards this year. He's going to be he's going to be a premier running back in the league. He'll be a top 10 running back in this league for a few years. I'm not saying he's going to be like some Hall of Famer, maybe never reaching all pro level, but he's a really good football player. Yesterday was the first time he's ever been really bottled up. Even last week he had when he wasn't super effective in the run game. I believe he had like 60 something receiving yards and was had 8 carries. He's found ways to put his imprint on every game besides yesterday, and he still had 2 touchdowns yesterday. I mean, it wasn't his best game by far, but the Raiders. I was talking to my guy Tashawn. The Raiders are actually one of the best run stopping defenses in the NFL. So it's actually not out of the realm for them to shut down a guy like Kenneth Walker. They've actually been pretty good against the run this year, just not very good in the back end and not very good at scoring points until today. So I think he'll be fine. I think that the Rookie of the Year talk is very interesting because I don't see a clear favorite on either side of the ball for Rookie of the Year. That may be a different conversation for a different day, but
well, we have a minute. We can talk about it now because we're going to talk. We have time to talk about Sunday Night Football in a minute.
Who would be the offensive guy? I don't have a clear offensive guy at all right now.
For me, before Breece Hall was hurt, it was him easily. After that, I think it's Chris Olave, but you could make a case that it's Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, or potentially Kenneth Walker or Dameon Pierce. In my opinion, Kenneth Walker is the third best rookie running back. So he's not really in the conversation for me. He's on a much better team than Dameon Pierce is. So if you're going to go running back, and if you can't go Breece Hall because he's hurt, I would go him. But to me, it's one of those 2 rookie receivers, either Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. And probably you'd take Chris Olave now if it was me, but also we'll talk about this here in a minute too. If Mike White continues to play well and he's not relying on Zach Wilson to throw him the ball, he may have a pretty solid run to close out the season and put himself over the top. So those are the guys who are in contention for it right now. And I think at this point, I'd take Chris Olave, but I don't think that it's, I mean, at this point last year, it was firmly stamped, like sealed, done, who the Rookie of the Year was going to be. Like we knew, but and this year it's not done. But to me, Olave is the favorite. What do you think?
I mean, probably by default right now. I think he's the favorite. I mean, we do have a significant stretch of season left. So now that you start to say the names, and I can kind of put the images to my brain, it's like there's about 3 or 4 guys that can make a significant push here. I think what's going to hurt Olave is just he's on a terrible team and that nobody cares about. Like, and we know that narratives factor as much into this as anything. So
Sure.
That's when we get to the defensive side of the ball. That's why Sauce will probably be the favorite right now, even though I don't think he should be, because the Jets are a great story. The Jets defense is playing very well, and that factors into it.
I disagree with you on that, but
that factors into it as much. I mean,
it's a factor, but I mean, to me, he is clearly the best defensive player so far. I mean, who else would it be? I mean, are you just saying he's not that good, or are you saying there's really somebody else who's been better?
I'm saying that there's 2 guys that have been better as far as corners go, and I'm saying that Aiden Hutchinson has shocked me and has played probably as well as any rookie on the defense side of the ball. Just nobody cares because they're too busy talking about the DBs. So it's like Aiden Hutchinson has played incredible. I believe he has a couple interceptions as well too now. Like, so he's up to like I'm just gonna pull it up because I don't want to lie and give him more than he does have. But I didn't think he played this well, especially for the Detroit Lions. So I mean, he's up to 31 tackles, 5.5 sacks, a fumble recovery, 2 interceptions, and 2 pass breakups. And I don't have the tackles for loss here, but he's projected to finish at 48 tackles, 8.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, which would be hilarious, 3 pass breakups, 2 fumble recoveries, and a forced fumble. I mean, if you do that over the course of a season, that is Rookie of the Year caliber. It's just, are we going to talk about it or not? But if we're talking about just actual corners, Tariq Woolen has been as good as any corner in the NFL, and he has the splash plays. I know that a lot of people are going to talk about what Sauce does and how he works within the system, but not everybody talks about football like that. Voters don't watch football like that. Voters are going to look at box scores. They're going to look at who has the most interceptions. They're going to look at who has the most tackles, who has the most splash plays. And nobody has more of those from the rookie class than Tariq Woolen. And then if we go look at the numbers in man coverage, nobody has been better, arguably in the NFL, than Derek Stingley Jr. His numbers are up there with everybody in the NFL as far as playing just man coverage and keeping guys. I think he's only given up 391 yards all year in man coverage. And a lot of those, I don't even know if I don't know how these are graded. Everybody has a different metric of what they consider or how they label man coverage, because everybody talks about that with Sauce, and everybody talks about that with Jalen Ramsey. So it's like, I don't know. Every different sites have different measurements, right? But for all those, Derek Stingley has been as good as anybody in man coverage. It's just, are we going to talk about it properly? Sauce is the best rookie on the best team, and I think he's had a hell of a rookie year. I mean, great rookie year. There's no way you could take that away from him. But he just gets talked about better because of the team that he's on. Kind of the same thing I was saying on offense with Olave. Olave's had a hell of a year, but are people going to care enough to acknowledge it? Because nobody cares about the Saints.
I think it plays a role. I don't know if it plays as heavy a role as you're saying. I mean, I think Sauce Gardner's been the best rookie, and I'm not taking away from either the guys who you mentioned. Tariq Woolen has certainly been better than expected considering his draft status, but I don't think that he's locked down in the same way. I mean, like, when Tariq Woolen gives up a big play, you're like, okay, you know what I mean? He's been playing well overall, and he does have picks to help account for that. But with Sauce Gardner, it's like when he gives up that big play, it's like genuinely surprise. Like when he got mossed by Chase Claypool this past week, that was like, whoa, you don't see that. You know what I mean? So I hear you, and I think Aiden Hutchinson was my pick to be Defensive Player of the Year, and I certainly think you could make an argument for it, but the most impactful player. I mean, I just don't think the Jets defense is what it is without Sauce Gardner. So it's not just being a good rookie on a good team or a good defense. It's a lot of what's happening there is specifically because of what he is and what he's been for them. So I'll say that. I think right now it would be Sauce Gardner and Chris Olave as my two personal favorites. Certainly something could change if somebody's statistics get real crazy. Like if the Lions somehow make a playoff berth for themselves, if they catch up to the Commanders and he goes off and he has, 6 sacks over the final 6 games or whatever the breakdown is, like, he could certainly put himself in that conversation because he's a story too. He's a hometown kid, second overall pick. So it's like, you definitely could see that happen. But I don't think anybody's been more impactful and not just being good on a good team, but more impactful than what Sauce Gardner has done. So it is an unusually good class for rookie corners, but he's kind of clearly been the best one in my opinion. So what about you? What about Breece Hall? Do you think Breece Hall would have been the clear favorite for Rookie of the Year if he continued the trajectory that he was on? Because he was on his way to, like, I think well over 1,600 total yards, and he was just kind of heating up in like the 3-4 weeks before he got hurt.
If he continued that trajectory, absolutely. I just don't think that any running back would continue that. He was on such a crazy streak, and who knows? Maybe he would have done some historic stuff. But that's why I said with Josh Jacobs, it's like I wasn't necessarily shocked that he had such a big game with those amount of touches, but it's just like I just don't foresee him getting those many touches. I don't foresee running backs making it a whole season, touching the ball as much as Breece Hall was. I didn't think he'd get hurt the way he did that early. But
I don't think he had a ridiculous number of touches. I mean, certainly nothing like Josh Jacobs. A lot of what he was doing is it would be one carry and he'd take it to the house, or one catch off a wheel route and he'd take it to the house. So it was like it was the explosion and the burst. I don't think his touch numbers were significantly higher than any of the other backs who are around the league lead in touches. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But my thing was that when you have games like that, you get the ball more. When your quarterback struggles the way Zach Wilson struggles, he was going to be getting the ball a whole lot more. And that's why I'm saying over the course of the year, any running back. That's why it's like what Derrick Henry has done in his career is the most miraculous thing I've ever seen in NFL history because running backs don't last this long. Running backs don't take those many carries, take those many hits, and be as healthy as he's been. I know he missed a significant portion of last season, the last I think it was 8 games or last six games. I can't remember what it was, but other than that stretch, he's been ridiculously healthy for the load that he's carried. But we've seen guys. I mean, just go down the list: Saquon, Zeke. I mean, everybody that we're used to seeing get a ton of carries. Even guys like Adrian Peterson had a great 8-9 years to start off their careers, and you saw it when they hit the wall. They hit the wall. So it's kind of like shocking to me to see how those guys have kind of like found a way. It's not those guys, Derrick Henry specifically, have found a way to like stay healthy and continue on the path that they have on. But absolutely, getting back to the point, I think that Brees, if he continued that trajectory, yeah, there's no question you would have to give it to him. I just hope that one day we can get to a point where it's not so, and this is never going to happen. So this is why like there's on like media and like you know guys like offensive line guys that just take it into their own hands and do their own stuff. But Rashawn Slater should have been the offensive rookie of the year last year, and there's no doubt about it. He came in, he was all pro out of the gate. No other rookie can say that. But that's just not how these things are voted on. You look at a guy like, and I can't believe it because he's played so well. Charles Cross has been incredible this year for the Seattle Seahawks. He struggled in the preseason, and his first game or two, you were a little worried about it, but he's played incredible for them. I mean, you just look around the league. You telling me Tyler Linderbaum isn't the best position player from the offensive rookie class? He is. There's no question about it. But it's just, are people going to talk about it that way? They're never going to be heralded as they should. But that's on, like I said, it's on the media guys and the writers to kind of take that into their own hands to give those guys their proper respect and their proper credit. Because, I mean, he's been Tyler Linderbaum, I don't think he's all pro level yet. There's too many good centers that have been doing it for too long and they're too consistent. But he could very well be Pro Bowler this year and probably should be considered as one of the 6 best centers already in the NFL. I mean, absolutely insane year for him. So shout out to him and shout out to Charles Cross. And I know that Evan Neal had an injury and Icky's played solid football, but the linemen from the class have done very, very well as well. So hopefully they get a little bit of love.
Yeah, I think we've just only now entered a bit of a renaissance for public understanding of offensive line play, and that's due to some specific guys who are really making an effort to go out and spread the knowledge and who are better, more media savvy. You know what I mean? They do a lot of podcast appearances. They do their own writing. So it's still a bit niche, certainly, but it's more available and more understood than it has been in a long time. And maybe someday we'll get to the point where an offensive lineman actually could win Rookie of the Year, because they're like the only position that can't win it, basically, because a linebacker, a defensive lineman, any secondary player could win it. Quarterback, running back, receiver, even a tight end could win it potentially, though it's not super likely. They're the only one where it's like you can basically chalk it up and say this is never going to happen. But
did you see the Dolphins yesterday without Teron Armstead?
Okay, so
Teron Armstead isn't the MVP of that team.
We gotta talk about this Sunday night game real quick, but there are two things that I want to talk about super quickly after that. So we'll see if Max Chadwick comes right in at noon or if we have a sec. But just to talk about this Packers-Eagles game, classic dad move for me. I'm watching this game. I fall asleep about halfway through the third quarter. I wake up and like my eyes have to adjust to the fact that number 10 is throwing the ball and not number 12. So I missed when that injury happened, and I saw the end of the game where they needed 2 scores to come back and try and tie it up or win it or whatever they were going to do, and it didn't work out. But the first half of this game was very, very fun to watch. Going into halftime, I think it was 2020. Eagles were doing their thing, running the ball, and the Packers were doing their thing, trying to hang, definitely being less overall efficient, but Aaron Rodgers just kept making really fun, impressive throws to watch, and his guys were actually catching the ball consistently. So, my key takeaways from this game are from about 66% of the way through and then like the last 2 drives. But I know Nick, his key takeaway was if you can't stop the run or at least make an impact against the run with your front 4, Eagles are just going to roll over you, which is probably true. But how do you feel about this game?
the Packers defense sucks. Is how I feel about this game. Like,
They
it's
hung in
illogical.
there in the beginning. They hung in for the first half, but
It's illogical. Like they have everything that they need. They have very good. Well, Rashawn Gary is out, so the pass rush definitely took a hit with him out. But they have a great interior with Jaron Reed and Kenny Clark. Um, they have solid edge guys. I mean, you still got Preston Smith out there. Then when you have Rashawn Gary healthy, he's one of the, he was flashing as one of the better DNs in the game. You have Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell. You have Jair Alexander, and you got I forget the kid's name, 29.
that's Rasul. Is that Rasul Douglas, 29?
Yes. You have a very solid defense. I don't understand how it has to be coaching to some degree. Like, there's no way a defense that talented, and these aren't guys that are washed up and past their prime. These are guys in their prime playing the best football of their careers. There's no way that defense should be that bad. So, but I don't want to harp on them too much. I think that Christian Watson is making very clear and obvious strides. I think Randall Cobb to be playing as well as he is. He doesn't have any like crazy stat lines. He's not just wowing you, right? But
he helps move the chains, though.
100%, and he's Aaron's guy. I mean, you see, when he's in the game, he's gonna get the ball to 18. Tunyon played pretty well last night. You saw the Packers. The light bulb's been going off for the Packers for the last couple of weeks. They just got to find ways to be consistently in the game at the end of the game and not having to go score every possession to keep pace. But that's what they're having to do. The Cowboys game, they're having to score to keep pace. This game, they're having to score. You gave up 40 points. It's hard to give up 40 points in the NFL. You don't see 40 points in the NFL too often. It just doesn't happen that often. Like, it's hard to give up 300 yards of rushing. I mean, I think that they gave up a Packers record yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. 363 yards is inexcusable on any level of football, especially the NFL. So they got to go back to the drawing board and fix something. The offense is playing well enough to win you games now. The defense has to get better. And on the other side, just got to give a ton of credit to Sirianni with his balanced attack. I think that he's done as good of a job of anyone as figuring it out. Halfway through last year, you saw him kind of figure it out. Like, the light bulb kind of went off on it, and they've just been extremely balanced ever since then. They had the hiccup in the playoffs last year against the Bucks, but the Bucks were a damn good team, and still are a good team, but they're still figuring it out. But ever since about midway point through last year, nobody's been better at getting the most out of his roster and being more balanced than Nick Sirianni and the Philadelphia Eagles, and they just find a way to do it. I tweeted out yesterday, they just respond every time. Every time that they need a drive, they need to go score a touchdown, they get it. Every time they need a stop to take the other team out, they get it. Every time they need to flip the field with the punt, they get it. Every time they need to make a field, every single time. They're 10-1 for a reason. They should be the favorites, Super Bowl favorites right now, in my opinion. The one game that they lost by, what was it? I can't remember the score of that game. But
it was close.
Crazy turnovers, crazy scenarios where they get the ball back and then the ball flips. A.J. Brown fumbles the ball going in to score. They were in position to win that game. I don't want to go too far on it, but Jalen Hurts should be firmly in the MVP conversation as well. Hell of a performance for them, and championship stuff for them to keep responding and finding ways to win.
And I low-key love Sirianni. He looks like just kind of like dull, but if you're watching him enough, like, you will see he gets heated, man. He has some real spice to him. I mean, he's swearing at the player who like went low on his offense on Lane Johnson. He's like straight cursing at him on the sideline. He's going up to the Indianapolis Colts fan talking shit about that's for Frank Reich. Like, I love this guy, and I think he fits well with the city, and that's always more impactful, I think, than people realize. You need a coach who vibes with the fans, not just caters to them, but actually fits well. So let's bring in Max Chadwick right here to talk about the college football update. There are two things I want to talk about super quickly about the NFL with him here, because I don't want to make him wait, but there are just two things I want to touch on, and I'm curious what both of your guys' thoughts are about them. But we'll be quick. Max, thank you for joining us, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. It was awesome last week of college football regular season, and I'm excited to go over it with you guys.
100%. So we're going to get to that in just a second. But the first thing is we have two things in the AFC East that I want to talk about that we didn't spend time on because both games were blowouts. But they're topical, and I think they're very impactful for the playoff race. So the first one is Mike White in the game. So Mike White is a guy who I watched last year when he went off in the Bengals game. Yes, he did just take what was there with all the underneath throws, and he was super efficient, which is something that's hard to consistently do. But also, you watch any 7-step drop that he made, it was kind of ugly. And so he's got some good torque on his passes if they're straight throws, but anything that requires touch is dangerous for me. I'm scared. And we didn't have to see him do much of that against the Bears. Similar defense, or at least in the sense that there's a lot of too high that leaves space underneath. He had a few deeper passes, but they're all very linear, like a lot of drive throws. So I know that Jets fans are very excited about this, but I have my reservations. And so I just want your thoughts on it. Max, you go first if you don't mind.
Yeah, Max, of course. I mean, you, of course, know more about the Jets than I would. But, like, yeah, it just seems to be a stopgap solution right now for the Jets with Mike White. And obviously the team is rallying behind him more than Zach Wilson. I think a lot of the reason why he was benched is because of those post-game comments that he made where he said he's not taking any responsibility basically for that loss against New England. But yeah, listen, Mike White's not the future. I know there were some Jets fans I saw on Twitter like, oh, this is our next guy.
A lot.
I'm like, dude, come on. Like, it's Mike White we're talking about here. But yeah, I don't anticipate Mike White being the guy. I don't even know if Zach Wilson's the guy. Maybe, next draft they'll be going after someone, maybe Caleb Williams if this thing really implodes in New York next year. But yeah, I think Mike White's a solution for right now, but I think even Robert Saleh knows like this isn't the long-term play for the Jets.
He doesn't want to buy into the hype outwardly too much. You can see that just from his post-game presser. The thing is, he's fun, and yes, he can do this against a defense that leaves him what he's good at. But I just don't see this against a defense that can play you very tightly. Like, I don't think Zach Wilson would have been a lot worse yesterday. I mean, probably a little worse, but not a lot. But I also think Mike White would have strongly struggled with both of his right side offensive line out last week against the Patriots in a bad weather game with a very good defense. Kyron, I know that you have been straight up out on Zach Wilson, so we don't need your thoughts on him. But what about Mike White? I mean, do you feel differently? Do you feel like this is a quarterback with a style that can actually get it done? Or do you basically agree with me?
No, I agree with you. I think he's good enough to stretch the field more consistently because that's what he's done when he's been in the game. Even going back to last year, I mean, the offense moves better when he's there, but there's also more boom or bust potential there. He also threw a lot of picks after that first game. I think you'll start to see a lot of that going forward. I'm kind of surprised that he was the guy over Flacco, to be honest. I thought that Flacco gave them a much better chance to be sustainably good. You get this game with him against the Bears, but I mean, everybody's looked pretty damn good against the Bears this year. They aren't a great defensive team. So I think that he had a great game. You give him his credit for that, but there's a lot of concern going forward. And like I said, Elijah Moore touched the ball more than he had all year. Garrett Wilson was more happy than he has been all year. The guys are happy. They're throwing the ball down the field, stretching the field more than they have all season, or at least since Flacco. But the turnovers are there. The turnovers are very likely to happen going forward. And I just hope they can lean on the run game a little bit more and not have to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game with Mike White, because that would lend for a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And they're too firmly in the hunt to throw it away right now. You have to play winning football. And that's on the staff. That's on the floor, those guys, to craft specific game plans week to week that minimize risk. And as long as you do that, I think they have a chance to win every game because their defense is very solid.
Yeah. Well, he's got 2 games coming up between the Vikings and the Bills in the next 2 weeks that will certainly test him. And I refuse to buy into the hype based off of what I've seen. He can change my mind, but it's an uphill battle. Last thing, super fast. We lost Terron Armstead during the game yesterday. And you mentioned it briefly a minute ago, Kyron. This is a really big problem, in my opinion, for the Miami Dolphins. Now, I don't know what the long-term nature of that injury is yet, but if it is anything for an extended period of time, Tua has been super efficient with the ball. but that is a very scary injury to me. And I feel like that this is just something that we have to comment on, considering they are currently division leaders. And the offense basically fell apart without him in the game. Even though it was a backup quarterback, it wasn't just a backup. It was pressure nonstop on him as soon as that happened. So I don't know. Do either of you guys have any insight into the potential longevity of that injury? I believe it was a pec injury, and people were pretty worried.
No, nothing's really come out yet on that. A lot of reports are saying right now that he's probably going to miss some time, but it could be worse. So hopefully he's going to come back at some point this season. But yeah, like you mentioned, Brandon Shell is going to be their starting left tackle with Austin Jackson manning the other spot. And yeah, it looks like without Teron Armstead, it's going to look like the Dolphins offensive lines that we've seen in the past, where it was just Tua is just getting killed back there. So yeah, I think this is a huge loss for Miami. But I do think he'll be back before at least the playoffs begin. So, that he'll at least be back for that. But right now, it could get a little dicey for Miami.
Yeah, I heard 2 to 3 weeks. They said that it wasn't wasn't a tear, that it's a pec strain, and that he was going to miss up to 2 to 3 weeks is what I heard. Hopefully, that's like the truth in this best case scenario, because pec injuries aren't even necessarily. It's initially painful, but it just kills functionality. There's no way to play through a pec injury and be effective, especially at left tackle. Maybe if you were inside at center. Don't have to move as much, or at guard where you could kind of rely on a little bit of help, maybe. But on the island, you can't have those injuries. So it is definitely a cause for concern. But I think a lot of the ineffectiveness you saw when he went out yesterday was on play calling. Why are you up 30 points? Play action against the Texans. It's just silly play calls. So it's going to be on Mike McDaniel. Significant loss, but it's going to be on Mike McDaniel and staff and Darrell Bevell and guys to basically turn it into Texas Tech air raid run and gun offense, and let's get the ball out quicker than you already are. Throw it to Tyreek and Waddle on the edges. Trent Sherfield and River Craycraft aren't getting nearly enough credit in this offense. Everybody's talking about Reek and Waddle, and absolutely rightfully so. But those guys have been so solid.
Yeah,
the third, the fourth, and fifth guys. You got Gesicki and Smythe. All those other guys are playing significantly well. I think you got to give them a little more credit. So it'll be on Mike McDaniel and those guys to be more creative in the offense and get the ball out faster than you already have been, which is almost impossible to fathom what that looks like. Get the ball out faster than it gets out now, but that's what you have to do. That's the task at hand. So I think they'll be okay. I think they'll figure it out. Teron Armstead's missed some time this year before, and they were okay. It wasn't the same as it was before, but he's missing time, and they've been okay. So hopefully that'll be enough to get him through here.
Well, we shall see. I certainly don't think they're going to miss the playoffs, especially if it is a 2 to 3 week injury, but it could give them a little bit of difficulty in the division hunt. So we'll see what happens. All right, I've made you wait long enough. Let's get into it. The final week of regular season college football. Max, I'll give you the floor. I'll let you get some things off your chest. I'll let you rant and rave and say whatever you want.
It was an awesome week, and that we went into it with basically 9 teams that had a legit shot at making the playoff. And now, heading into Conference Championship Saturday, we're gonna have 6 teams that have a legit shot. And that's because there are 3 massive losses that happened on Saturday. Clemson going down to South Carolina pulling off their second straight big win, in the second straight time they've eliminated a playoff contender after beating Tennessee a couple weeks ago. Now they beat Clemson. So they're out of it as well. USC, I thought, proved a lot against Notre Dame. I know Kyron and I were waxing poetic about the Fighting Irish before it, but USC, they really proved a lot to me in that game. I really thought that was the game where USC is going to end up going down, and they looked really, really good against the Fighting Irish. So now I think they're a win away from making the college football playoff. They got to play Utah, though, who they ended up losing to. So that's another team. LSU went down against Texas A&M. That was a huge, huge game. I know Kyron was probably watching that game. LSU's got no shot now at making the college football playoffs. That's another one right there. So it was a really historic week of college football where it was like, all right, here are some teams that can make the playoff, and 3 of them end up going down. So it was a really, really fun weekend of college football. Oregon was the other team that I thought had a remote chance at making the playoff. I didn't really think they had much of a shot, but they ended up losing to Oregon State after blowing a massive lead in that game too. So, so 9 teams going into the weekend, and now there's 6, I think.
Yeah, I think USC made the biggest stride, and I think that Caleb Williams made the biggest stride in the Heisman push. I'm not nearly as like in awe of Caleb Williams as everybody else is. It's funny watching like the discourse, everybody talk about it, and I'm like, he's a good player having a crazy year. But it's like the Mahomes stuff is like just blowing me right now. I can't deal with that. Like it's just silly. Like even in college, Mahomes threw for like 55 touchdowns or something crazy, or he had some kind of crazy year. He's a good player, but can we just please stop with all the comparisons and like, God, please just enjoy the football. So like you said, I think that they made the obvious, the biggest stride this week. I didn't think that Notre Dame's offense was anything great. I don't think they're necessarily a balanced team yet. And we highlighted that. We said that the defense is playing as good as anybody, and they're a quarterback and a couple of skill guys away from being a very solid team. And I think you saw a little bit of that there in that game, because they were able to score, but they weren't able to score as fast as they needed to. They weren't able to sustain drives as much as they needed to. And the defense played okay. I think the defense they got to a lot of third downs, man. They just couldn't get off the field. Caleb Williams was great at extending plays, and it's hard to cover Jordan Addison and Mario Williams and Brendan Rice and those guys for more than 3 seconds. It's just, you can't ask college DBs to do that. So when you can extend that plays that long, I think that's the biggest. It's funny because that's like the most impressive part about the offense for USC, and that's been the case over the last 4 or 5 weeks that I've watched them more heavily. They extend plays very well. They have big plays every now and then, but most of their sustainable, it's funny because they should be sustainable, but it is on broken plays. Just Caleb Williams extending the drive, running out and getting a third down conversion with his legs, or running around for 10 seconds and finding somebody down the field. It's almost uncanny, but it's kind of the calling card to the offense now. So I still don't take them that seriously as a playoff contender, but I think that you can kill all the debates about whether or not they should get in with that performance there if they get past Utah. So if they get past Utah, you got to kind of kill that noise. But the team that I was the most impressed with this weekend was TCU. I gave them hell all year, and I still don't take them that seriously in the playoff picture either, as far as beating a Georgia or beating a Michigan. But that performance was exactly what they needed to shut people up. Iowa State's not some great team. They're a below 500 ball club. But when you go out there and beat them the way they did, I think they put up 40-something points in the first half. I mean, that was a bloodbath. So that's what you do when you're backs against the wall and you need to just shut people up and prove people that you're a legit football team. You beat the crap out of team you're supposed to beat the crap out of instead of taking them to the wire like they have been. So I think that was the biggest win of the year for them. But the highlight is going to be on USC because they have prime time. They got the Heisman, candidate. So that's going to get all the most attention. But I was very, very impressed with TCU this week.
So was I. No, so was I. And obviously, I know we're going to get into this a little bit too, but the biggest game of the year was Ohio State, Michigan. And man, Michigan put the beat down on Ohio State. That was a eye-opener for me because going into it, I've been hearing that Blake Corum wasn't going to get that many carries. He only got 1 carry actually in the entire game because of that knee injury. And if you told me that before the game that you'd only get 1 carry, I'm like, all right, Ohio State might blow him out. And it was Michigan who just bullied them. And it was like last year too, where it was like the battle in the trenches was really what pushed that game, where Michigan was getting anything they wanted on the ground. And also Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo, and everyone was doing anything they wanted to that Ohio State offensive line. And it looked like a lot like last year where Michigan's offensive line was getting unbelievable push. Donovan Edwards was fantastic in that game. JJ McCarthy, who I have been down on a lot this year, I think he's getting a little overrated. He proved a lot in that game too. I thought that was a very gutsy performance from JJ McCarthy. And, Georgia ended up winning their game against Georgia Tech, so they clinched a playoff spot. And I think Michigan clinched a playoff spot as well by beating Ohio State.
Yeah, man, I got to agree. I was, and I don't want to say I was surprised with the outcome of the Michigan-Ohio State game. I was surprised at how quickly Ohio State laid down.
Yeah.
Like, it was a very close game until halfway through the fourth quarter, and then you literally saw the light just come out of them. They gave up. Strange performance, man. Last year they got out physical, but they were in that game to the end. They were playing decent football. The offense was. This week, man, it's surprising because Blake Corum didn't even play. I think, we'll get into the playoff conversation and the discourse around here in a second. But when you lose to Michigan, who hasn't been a crazy explosive offense all year, they've scored points, but They haven't played like that. They haven't rushed for They haven't had a guy go for 200 yards. Their backup go for 200 yards on anybody. Like, they've been solid. Jason McCarthy's been solid. That was just an ass whooping. Like, you can't put a team like that in the playoffs that gave up that performance to that team. We got to give Michigan credit. They're a hell of a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what argument does Ohio State have to be in the playoff now? What's their best win? Penn State?
Probably Penn State, yeah.
Then Penn State, they don't have their Penn State's signature win is Auburn. Going on the road to beat Auburn, probably. Or maybe Illinois, but I don't think do we really rate Illinois like that, or do we give Illinois a lot of credit as far as being a quality win? I mean, I think it's tougher to go on the road to play in Jordan here than it would be to play Illinois. But that's my opinion on that. But Ohio State hasn't done enough to make a playoff. I think that 10-2 SEC teams, or even I hate that they lost, but a 10-2 Oregon team, 11-2 Oregon team had a much better argument than 11-1 Ohio State to me. Those we have to start and this is why I'm glad the 12-team playoffs coming out, because we get to end all this for good. Now we just get to put the 12 teams in there and let them beat up on each other, and now there's no room left for the discourse. I'm sure 13 and 14 will be bitching about not getting in, but who cares? If you're 13 and 14, you don't have a chance. You shouldn't deserve a chance to get a national championship. But I wanted to ask you how you felt about Washington. Do you think Washington, and I'm not talking about sneaking into the playoffs this year, but as far as next year, when you have a 12-team playoff, a team like Washington catching fire at the time that they are, I don't think anybody will want to play that offense right now. The defense isn't very good, but I don't think anybody wants to play Michael Penix Jr. and those guys and out wide, and I don't think anybody can stop that offense.
No, that offense is awesome. And unfortunately, I was really looking forward to a USC-Washington Pac-12 title game, but because a lot of different weird tiebreakers in the Pac-12, it ends up being Utah that goes to the Pac-12 championship game, which is still fun, because
it's a matchup for USC, by the way.
Yes, exactly. So, it's a chance for USC to exercise some demons against Utah. I actually got an argument with a friend of mine, Nick, who you guys work with. And we were arguing. He said that, if USC beats Utah, they should be ranked above TCU because they, avenged their one loss in the year. And I was like, I still think you got to give TCU 13-0 over them. But it's definitely an argument. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, Washington, Michael Penix Jr., I think still has the most passing yards in college football right now. He's been fantastic. I think he's exhausting his eligibility after this year. But they got a 5-star quarterback right behind him in Sam Heward, who was the number 3 quarterback recruit behind Quinn Ewers and Caleb Williams in that class. He's been a backup for them for 2 years now. So, not a lot of people are talking about, when Penix is leaving, that's a huge loss for them. But yeah, they got another lefty, by the way, like Penix, in Sam Heward, Brock Heward's son. And he could be, that next star quarterback in that Washington offense. Because I think, they're cooking with gas right now.
Yep. And then we got South Carolina game. Spencer Rattler, man. Is Spencer Rattler going to sneak his way into the second round? Or, the tools have always been there. And I think he played pretty damn well at Oklahoma. When he got benched, he had 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He was playing fine.
Yeah.
It was just, when the pressure's on, the pressure's on. So they made a switch. But
it's going to be for him getting into the second round would probably be a stretch. But if so, it's going to rely so heavily on his interviews. Because that's one of the biggest criticisms of him right now is that, we've seen ups and downs and whatever. You can chalk up anything to anything and have higher expectations at the pro level. But it's all going to be all about what at least some coaches see in him in terms of coachability and can he actually lead an NFL franchise? Because a second-round quarterback is like you're saying to yourself, this guy might actually be our starting quarterback long-term. And that's doing it at the collegiate level is very different from a personality standpoint. You know what I mean? So that's
it's got Mark Davis written all over it, man. That's all I'll say. But listen, can we talk about Shane Beamer for a second, man? Wow, what a job he's done. They've had some tough losses this year, but to close the year the way that they have, beating Tennessee, they've beaten 2 top 10 teams. Yep. They beat Tennessee, then went on the road to beat Clemson. And Clemson has a damn good defense. Their offense, DJ Uyunglele and all those guys, we not very good. Let's just be honest about that. But the defense is very good. So for them to score the points, it's a response. They have to keep coming back and driving the length of the field to do it. They weren't just getting explosive plays and just scoring a bunch of quick touchdowns. They were having to sustain drives and make tough plays, 4th down conversions to score touchdowns. To finish 8-4, they're sitting, I think they're number 22 right now. to finish the season nationally ranked at 8-4 and beat Tennessee and Clemson. Hell of a year for them. And it kind of like kills so much of the SEC BS that I see. They're like, oh, it's SEC bias and it's this. Like, no, look at the numbers. Like the most 8-win teams in the country, at least 8-win teams in the SEC. Tied for the most 10-win teams with the Big Ten. I mean, if LSU didn't crap the bed, they would have the most 10-win teams in the country. But they also have the most ranked wins as far as AP ranked wins against non-conference teams. They also have the best non-conference record. I mean, every viable metric you can have to show you that the SEC is leagues above the rest of the conferences is there if you can get out of your own way and stop hating to do it. Everybody's just tired. I would have so much more respect for people if they're like, we just hate the SEC and we're tired of you guys. And that would be so much easier to deal with. I can respect it, but they're like, I was arguing with my guy, A.G. Hobner, he works for the Pac-12 and works for CBS out in Sacramento. He was like, Alabama doesn't have any quality wins. Tennessee doesn't have any quality wins. And I'm like, how can you sit here and tell me that USC has quality wins over Oregon State and who's another decent team? Well, UCLA, right? And then turn around and say that Alabama beating 8-4 Texas, being 8-4 Ole Miss, being 8-4 Mississippi State that are all ranked still, and tell me that those aren't in turn quality wins. Alabama's non-conference schedule, they play Utah State, which is they were the defending Mountain West champions. Like, it's no contest. When you look at a team like Tennessee as well, Tennessee played non-conference, played Pitt, and beat 8-4 Pitt. I mean, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts about it. How do you feel about the SEC bias narrative? Because I think it's just like it's disingenuous to me.
Oh, it 1,000% is, and I think it's fatigue. It's just like it's it's saying the SEC is the best every year. It's just like people get tired of saying it, but it doesn't mean it's not true. Like the SEC is clearly far and away the best conference in America this year, especially with the Big Ten this year. It used to always be. There may be 1 or 2 years where the Big Ten had a serious argument with the SEC when the SEC had a down year and the Big Ten had a great year. This year, the Big Ten is not that good. It's Ohio State and it's Michigan, 2 teams that can make the playoff. Penn State, I think, is like a top 10 team in the country. After that, I mean, you got Purdue winning that Big Ten West. Right now, Purdue's not even ranked in the AP poll. So you have an unranked team playing in your conference championship game. And you're trying to argue that that's the best conference in America. Like, that's just not the case. The SEC, I agree with you, Kyron, is far and away the best conference in America right now.
I mean, look, you see, South Carolina is the fourth place team in the SEC East, and they went and beat the ACC leader. Yeah. Tennessee beat the second place ACC Coastal team. We saw what Georgia did to Oregon. I mean, we could just keep going on, but Alabama beats the third place Big 12 team. It's like, every time you look at the comparisons and you actually compare what they've done, it's not very close. And it's going to come into play if anything happens kind of strange this week and we get a shakeup and it comes down to Alabama versus Ohio State to get in. Because Alabama's sitting there at 5-6, depending on the polls today. And if USC were to lose, if any scenario where TCU were to lose to Kansas State, you're going to get that argument. Who deserves to get in more, Ohio State or Alabama? Who do you think? I just wanted to hear your thoughts about it.
Let's give the full thoughts and predictions now because we're coming up on it.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I think there's a 6-team race, like I said before. I think Georgia and Michigan are guaranteed. I think if USC and TCU win, they're guaranteed. If one of those 2 lose, I think what the playoff committee will do is put Ohio State in over Alabama. And then if both of them lose, I think you put in Ohio State and Alabama in over TCU and USC. So I think, unfortunately, for the Crimson Tide fans, I think the only realistic shot they have making the playoff is if both TCU and USC lose their conference championship games on Saturday.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I tend to agree that's what would happen. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that that's what should happen. Like, I think that they just haven't played well enough against the good teams that they played, and the one really good team that you played, because the Penn State win is so tricky to me because Penn State played Ohio State and Michigan and got completely curb stomped, blown out both times. They won the rest of their games, so they're a solid team, of course. But how good is Penn State actually? And when we're talking about quality wins on the resume, when the 2 teams that they played of any significance this year, they lost by 20+ points in both of those games. But then you compare that to Alabama, their 2 losses are by a combined 4 points on the road against top 12 teams. So
yeah,
and so I think that is how it should go. And I also think if USC wins out, I agree with. I think that they should jump TCU as far as rankings because the strength of schedule at that point would be significant, and they would have avenged their only loss. Beating Utah would be their 5th ranked team if you count the postseason as a rank. I mean, I don't really know how they do it for the bowl selections, but it won't really matter. They'll win and they'll be in. But I think they should probably jump. So if I had to give my prediction, that's what it would be. I think that USC edges out a close one. I think they win. I think that Georgia obviously wins, and Michigan. I mean, come on, they shouldn't even play that game. But and then TCU Kansas State is very, very interesting to me. I think on a neutral field with Adrian Martinez, I think I'm going to take Kansas State to win that game. TCU just has to prove it to me one more time. Prove it to me one more time, and I'll shut up. So I'll take Kansas State to win that game. And then, unfortunately, Ohio State to get in and get beat by 40 by Georgia. But that would be my picks for now. And then, by default, Caleb Williams wins the Heisman. I think he's had a great year. I think he should be a Heisman finalist. But kind of the weirdest year for Heisman in a very, 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 very long time. But I think he wins by default.
I think TCU and USC both win their games. I think it's close, though. And I think TCU would still be the number 3 team. And USC would be the 4. So it'd be Georgia, USC, Michigan, TCU in the playoff. And then, I agree with Kyron. I would be floored if Caleb Williams right now, according to betting odds, has a 96% chance to win the Heisman. He's like minus 2,500 right now in the odds, which is insane. It is a weird year for the Heisman. I would still give it to Blake Corum. And maybe the most deserving quarterback is Drake May, who has 3 losses right now, so he has no shot at it. But I'm okay with Caleb Williams. I was not really cool with CJ Stroud winning it, so I was kind of happy that Michigan won that game. But I'm cool with Caleb Williams. So that's an okay Heisman in my opinion.
Yeah.
So we were believing that it was going to be CJ Stroud through 12 straight weeks of college football, and in the final week, the prediction changes. That's pretty crazy. So again, me not being the most intense college football follower, when does voting basically cut off for the Heisman? Like, when are you supposed to stop taking into account what happens?
This week. This is the last week, and then after this they'll vote. And they'll
December 10th
award it. Yeah.
So December 3rd is the weekend. This weekend is the championship weekend, and December 10th will be the Heisman Trophy presentation. So I think the ballots will do that Tuesday afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. So as soon after this week, they'll turn in their ballots. So it could be some major shakeup if Caleb Williams has a stinker. Who knows what the heck happens then? Because there is no necessarily front runner after him, unless Corum just goes for like 200. But I wouldn't even play him if I was Harbaugh.
Well, I was going to say, is he going to play? That's the question.
I wouldn't even play him. But like you said, if they lose a game and it's not necessarily his best performance, that could really shake up the Heisman conversation. And then who knows? But if you had to predict, you have to predict Caleb plays well enough to win that game and then in turn win the Heisman.
Yeah, I mean, just to show you how insane this Heisman race has been, CJ Stroud entered Saturday as the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. And after the 12 o'clock and after the games on Saturday, Caleb Williams became the heavy, heavy favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. So who's to say, like this, if like Kyron said, if he lays a stinker against Utah and they lose again and they don't make the playoff, they could all of a sudden look at maybe a Blake Corum or CJ Stroud. I mean, Max Duggan is 3rd in odds right now. I don't know if he will get it, but Stetson Bennett is 4th in odds right now.
Oh my God.
It's insane. Blake Corum is not even getting respected in the odds right now.
Stetson Bennett, what are we doing, people?
I know. It's insane, but I don't know what would happen if Caleb Williams doesn't win this game on Saturday. I personally want Blake Corum to win it, but I just don't think it'll happen. So after that, I mean, they might go back to CJ Stroud and give him the award.
So this is funny because in the pros, the running back position has been devalued because in some ways it's heavily reliant on the offensive line, and part of it has to do with the longevity of the career. So, you know what I mean? They don't want to pay these guys, and if you don't want to pay them, then you probably shouldn't draft them high. You know what I mean? And they're relatively available in the pros. But it almost feels like that devaluing has started to happen at a collegiate level. But I don't even think that it's necessarily the same thing, because an elite running back impacts the game in the collegiate level a lot more because they're going up against I mean, maybe the conferences are closer, but still overall much lesser competition defensively, right? So like an elite athlete like a Bijan Robinson
Yep.
or a Blake Corum is a more impactful player. Do you think that devaluation is happening as a result of that conversation at the pro level, or what?
I think the pro level, so it's actually interesting. PFF has a stat called wins above replacement, like how baseball, basketball,
Right.
a lot of other sports have it. Running back in the NFL is not a very valuable position. And, I think anyone can tell you that. In college, Blake Corum right now is by far the most valuable non-quarterback in college football, and which is crazy. When you have, other valuable positions in the NFL, like wide receiver, corner, they're usually the most valuable. Now you're looking at running back in college because, athleticism is a bigger deal in college, where it's like, if your guy's more athletic than this guy, it's going to work. And also in college football, they don't throw the ball as much in the NFL. Michigan runs the ball on most of its plays. So Blake Corum is really that offense right now. So, while in the NFL, it's more running the ball and success running the ball is more dependent on scheme and offensive line. College really is, do you have a superstar in your backfield? And, so it's interesting that in college, running backs are very, very valuable. In the NFL, not so much.
But is this conversation in the NFL about the devaluation of the running back position affecting the outside perception? So I'm not saying is the position devalued. I'm saying is because if Blake Corum is that good and he's not even really in the conversation, is that a byproduct of the NFL conversation in the media?
I don't think so, because if he played Saturday and if he ran for the yards that Donovan Edwards played for, then it wouldn't be a conversation. He'd be either first place right now or second place right now.
Yeah,
I say he'd be first place right now. It's just a missed opportunity. But you look at you look at the course of the history, though. I mean, there's been plenty of running backs who've had legitimate shots to win, and there's been, I think 3 different running backs have won in the last 10 years. I mean, I know Derrick Henry won one. I know it's going back a little bit to 2009, but Mark Ingram won one.
That's a while. I mean,
Bryce Love finished second in 2017. Christian McCaffrey was a finalist, I believe. There's been a ton of running backs who've had legit chances to win it. Najee Harris finished 4th in voting 2020. There's been a lot of guys that have had legitimate chances to win it at running back, and Corum would have been that guy this year. He still should be a finalist. I think he'll probably be a finalist because the odds don't necessarily reflect voting and how the actual voters are going to do it. But if Corum had played and he ran for 200 yards like he has been all year, he would be right there as the favorite or number 2 with a legit chance to win it. I don't think that conversation is really affecting how valuable they are, especially college.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because it is a kind of a quarterback award and like how the MVP is. But, Blake Corum, if you're really saying the most outstanding player in college football, I would say is Blake Corum right now. Because right now in PFF grading, he's a 95.9. And the highest graded player that we've ever seen in the Power 5 level for a season was Kyle Pitts, Quinnen Williams, and Chase Young, all tied with a 96 grade. So Blake Corum could pass those guys. Really, he's only 0.1 behind them right now. So he is putting up a historically awesome season at Michigan. And I just don't think he's getting enough credit like he should.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I just don't really follow the conversation that much. But would you say it's easier for a running back to win the award than a wide receiver? Because I think a receiver's won it more recently than a running back.
Yeah, but that only happened really twice, I believe. Now, Devontae Smith was the most recent one, of course. But yeah, it is way more common for a running back just because they get the ball a lot more than a superstar receiver would.
Yeah, I think it is that way, but it probably shouldn't. I remember, Michael Crabtree, he was the best player in football that year. He should have won. Larry Fitzgerald was the best player in football that year. He should have won. I was glad that Devontae Smith got his.
Mm-hmm.
I think going back before him, I think Tim Brown was the only other guy that did it. So, but there's been a lot of incredible receiver years that haven't gotten enough love. But I think that's because, like you said, it's a quarterback award, and when running backs are in the conversation, it's because they've had such an incredible year that you just literally cannot ignore. So when they're having those kind of years, it's hard to overlook it, and they normally get the nod there. But ton of good running backs here. This is one of the deepest running back classes in a long time, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1,000%. Bijan's having an all-time year too. Nobody's talking about Bijan Robinson's year. He's doing crazy numbers this year.
Chris Rodriguez has run for 900 yards in 9 games. Like, Chris Rodriguez at Kentucky is going to be a steal for somebody in the 3rd round or 4th round of this draft. He's insane. What's the kid's name from Cal, the running back of Cal? Forget his name.
Jaden Ott, the true freshman. He's a beast. He's going to, in a couple of years, he's going to be one of those guys. There's a ton of running back talent right now. I mean,
even Ohio State, they didn't play like it Saturday, but they have 3 dang good backs.
Yep.
with Henderson,
Mayan
Mayan
Williams, yeah.
and Holland. So
Yeah.
those guys are all really, really good. I mean, there's a ton of running back talent, man.
Yeah, it's insane.
So I won't keep you too much longer, but it looks like our final segment is not going to make it again. So I just want to ask you guys real quick, since we haven't talked about this since about halfway through the year, who are some guys who you think are the most likely candidates for some of the other individual position awards? Whether it's the what's it
Like
called?
the Blitnikoff, like for
the Bolitnikov or the Nagurski Award or the Outland Trophy, like some of these specific awards.
Ooh.
Well, I know the Remington should be Seb Van Pran from Georgia. He should win, and he's the best center in the country to me, by a considerable margin. I think he should be a late first round pick, but he won't because it's just the way. Like, centers and guards aren't necessarily at a premium unless you're just starving for it. But I think he should do that. I think he should get that. I think Bijan's probably going to win. The Doak, I think that he deserves it. Corum is a viable option there as well, but I think him being out the last year, really, really, the last game of the year in the biggest game with the biggest stage could potentially hurt him a lot. I mean, hopefully it doesn't, but I think that's what will happen. And as far as Bolitnikov, I think everybody's on the Marvin Harrison Jr. train, but you can't ignore what Jalen Hyde's done this year to me. I think Jalen Hyde has done enough, and he deserves that award.
Yeah, it's tough. The interesting one, I think the Allen Trophy is another one that I love looking at every year. And I think Joe Alt, the Notre Dame offensive tackle, has been unbelievable this year. He's the highest run blocking rate in the country, third lowest pressure rate allowed in the country. Like, he's not even eligible until next year's draft. So I think he could be pushing Penei Sewell for like the best offensive tackle prospect that we've seen in at least a few years. The defensive, the Nagurski Awards are very interesting to me because there really isn't a superstar defensive player like Aiden Hutchinson last year or Will Anderson Jr. Like, Will Anderson Jr. has been great this year, but I don't know if he's been as dominant as he's been in years past. So that one's going to be really interesting to see who they actually give that award. I think Avon Pace Jr., the linebacker from Cincinnati, I know he plays in the group of 5. He has been unbelievable this year. But other than that, like, I don't know who you give that award to right now, just because there hasn't been an unbelievable defensive player in college football this year.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And so who knows? I don't even have a legitimate pick to make there. Like you said, it's 2 up in the air. I think Will Anderson's had an incredible year for what they've asked him to do. His numbers don't look as good as they did last year, but he's been playing 4I in the SEC at 240 pounds. And he's top 10 in pressure rate, top 10 in tackle for loss. It's been pretty crazy to see him do what he's done this year. But I don't think that he doesn't have the narrative behind him this year. But on a whole different end, the Mackey Award race is the most competitive and the most exciting race this year. You got Dalton Kincaid at Utah, who I think deserves it. You got Brock Bowers, who's the best player and the best prospect of the group by far, in my opinion. And then you got Michael Mayer, who's going to be the first tight end taken off the board in the draft this year. All having great years. And I'm sure I'm probably leaving somebody out that deserves some love, but those 3 jump out so much to me. I think those 3 should be the best. I mean, those should be the top 3 in how we pick from them. And if I had a vote, I would vote for Dalton Kincaid. I think he's that important to that team. Without Dalton Kincaid, that team does not win 9 games, and they're not playing for a Pac-12 championship this week.
Yeah, I actually agree that those are probably the 3 finalists that I would make. I would put Kincaid second. I think I might give the award to Michael Mayer right now. I think the Notre Dame offense really revolves around him. And like you said, he's going to be a top 15, maybe even pick in the draft. He has been outstanding for Notre Dame this year as both a run blocker and receiver for them. He might be the most well-rounded tight end in college football. So I would give the award to Michael Mayer right now. But it is close. Dalton Kincaid and Brock Bowers have both been unbelievable this year.
Yeah, if Brock was anywhere else, if he was anywhere else but Georgia, if he was playing with Bryce Young at Alabama, he probably have over 1,000 yards this year.
Yeah, he would.
So Brock's the best player. He's the best talent. In my opinion, he's the best tight end prospect we've seen since Redacted and Greg Olson. So it's like I think he's the best I've seen. I've said it multiple times. What Brock Bowers does is absolutely insane for his size and his athletic ability. So it's crazy that he probably won't even be considered seriously. But did you see he's nominated for? I think it's for the Lombardi. Not the Lombardi, the Nagurski Award as well.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh yeah, that one, yeah.
Has that ever been done before?
I don't think so. No.
Like he's nominated for the Mackey and for the Allen. Like absolutely insane year for him. I don't think he deserved that, but it's awesome to see that happen. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before.
Yeah. No, he's been fantastic. So you think he's better than Kyle Pitts? That's an interesting argument I've had with some of my friends. Yeah.
I don't think there's any comparison. Kyle Pitts is a freak athlete, but Kyle Pitts was playing in the slot most of the time. Kyle Pitts didn't have his hand in the dirt. He wasn't blocking guys. He wasn't taking reverses 80 yards to the house. He wasn't doing the things that Brock Bowers does. And that doesn't mean he's not a ridiculous talent, because he absolutely is. And I was okay with the Falcons drafting him where they did, but he ain't better than Brock Bowers.
Yeah, as a tight end, I agree with you.
My thing has always been with Kyle Pitts is like, what is the difference between like a heavily receiving H tight end or a flex tight end and a big slot? Like, how much really is there a difference?
Well, in that offense, there wasn't a lot. I mean,
no.
Again, it depends on if you're a heavy receiving option as a flex tight end, then what is the difference? Just my opinion.
Yeah, not much. It really was basically a receiver in that Florida offense that in 2020. So yeah, it's not a lot. And I think as a pure tight end, I would probably agree that Brock Bowers is probably a better pure tight end than Kyle Pitts was.
Yeah, I hear it. And then, the Travis Kelce and the Gronk conversation is like also hilarious too, but people don't value blocking enough when you talk tight ends. That is half of the job. It's more than half of the job. Like, unless you're Travis Kelce, because he gets so many targets a game, but you have to value blocking much more than you value anything else when you talk about tight ends, because that's what you're doing most of the time, unless you're Kyle Pitts playing in the slot for 80% of your snaps. But Brock Bowers blocks. Darnell Washington is probably the best blocking tight end I've seen in college he's another tackle for Georgia.
He's a tackle. Yeah, he's basically a tackle. He's unbelievable.
The average is 17 yards a catch as well.
He's a freak. Yeah,
we're talking long-term prospects. He could end up having the most fruitful pro career out of all the guys that we're discussing.
Oh yeah, Nick Merriam has Darnell Washington as his number one tight end in this draft, and like I have Mayer personally, but like I completely understand the thinking with Darnell Washington, because like you mentioned, he's a freak. Like he's a 270-pound tight end who blocks like an offensive tackle, who also
jumps over safety.
Hurdles guys as well. Like this guy is a freak that I don't think is getting nearly enough credit, not only at Georgia with Brock Bowers there, but like in the national conversation as well. He's been unbelievable this year as well.
All right. Well, our next guest is here. So that's going to be Lawrence Owen of Colts Law and Believe in Colts. So we're going to have him on to preview Monday Night Football in just a moment. But first of all, I want to thank you, Max, for coming on for your weekly segment, as always. Let everybody know where they can find you and your social media. And we will have you back on next week to talk about the official college football playoff, of course, as well as the outcome of the championship weekend. So let everybody know if you would.
Yeah, of course. So you can find me at pff.com doing a ton of articles a week. I think it's 5 to 6 at this point. And then follow me on Twitter at Chad_Maxwick and TikTok as well there too. But yeah, I cannot wait for this weekend. It's going to be unbelievable.
All right, man. And Kyron, this is going to be it for you too. We will talk to you again next Monday to recap the NFL week and college football week. So let everybody know where they can find you as well.
Just follow me on Twitter at Kyron Samuels, and then you get the rest of the stuff, man. Thank you for a good show again. Noah, shout out to you, my boy. So a good show today. I'll see you guys soon.
All right. Appreciate you. We will talk to you soon. All right, Lawrence, how you doing, my man?
A little frazzled. For some reason, I was thinking that I was supposed to come on and talk this evening prior to the game. I completely forgot that you were around noonish. So my apologies. This is the second time in a row that I have messed this up, and I am really, really sorry about that.
It's all good, man.
It's been really hectic around the house.
We have had, if there's anybody who understands being flexible, it is certainly me. We fortunately have Noah, who's primed to talk Colts yesterday, and whoops. This is what happens when you have a touchpad mouse. And of course, both Max and Kyron were more than willing to hang out and talk a little bit extra college football. You hardly have to, pull too hard for that one. But you are here to talk about the Steelers at Colts tonight on Monday Night Football. you are the host of Believe in Colts and the Colts Law YouTube channel. So, first of all, man, thank you for joining me. And this is the third time you've been on the show, because you were on once to preview the season, once to preview the Colts Thursday night game, which they did win, hence elongating our stretch of, for some reason, being a good luck charm to whichever team shows up on our show to preview Thursday Night Football. But so for tonight, what we're going to do, since we've kind of missed the first half of the segment, is we're just going to dive right into the game preview. We've also talked a fair amount of Colts, especially last week, having George Brenner on the show as well. George Brenner. So for this game coming up, how are you feeling about it? What is the injury report looking like, in your opinion? When you look at the Steelers in advance, what is it that jumps out at you? Bigger picture, then we can get into some details.
Well, injury report really isn't as bad as what it looks. The problem is the Colts have been dealing with a lot of illness over the last 2 weeks. It's not the COVID situation, but it is that flu that's been running around, and it's been wreaking havoc over the last couple of weeks with the Indianapolis Colts in that locker room. The leading NFL tackler right now, Zaire Franklin, may or may not be able to play. We've got a few people that are actually out due to that. Then we've got another guy who is out, or probably won't play, is Kwity Paye. We've kind of had that strong side defensive end issue all year, whether they're hurt or someone else gets hurt, and that. So that's a big question mark for there. The biggest issue that I have with the Indianapolis Colts facing the Pittsburgh Steelers is their pass rush, which they're very good at, especially with TJ Watt back, versus the Indianapolis Colts pass protection, which they have been not good at all year round. And, it's a little bit of a worry there. Everywhere else, I kind of like where the Colts are leaning up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I like the run game versus the Pittsburgh run defense. I like the Colts defense overall against the Pittsburgh offense, even with some of the young rookies that they have over there on their offensive side, especially at quarterback and at wide receiver. But the Colts have a top 5 defense in the NFL. They're incredibly good at stopping people from gaining yards and even points. But man, if that defense on Pittsburgh is able to get to the quarterback, or able to, get penetration to stop the running game, you could see a very stagnant offense for the Colts again. And it could end up looking like, we got a Monday night football game that could legitimately look like it's supposed to be on Thursday night football, right? As we've seen this year with a really kind of overall low scoring Thursday night football games.
Yeah, well, I certainly think the matchup of the Colts O-line and the Steelers defensive line is something to pay close attention to. So, because the Steelers, they are not just a good pass rush, they're also an excellent run stopping unit. TJ Watt is very good against the run. Cam Hayward is tremendous against the run. He has been a long time top 2 gapper in the NFL for since basically he was drafted. Incredible pick by them. And then Larry Ogunjobi, I think I'm seeing that he's maybe even off the injury report here, or if he's, so he's going to be in there, and he is also a good interior player as well. So if there is one matchup that I think is going to be a particularly tough out, that would be it. Now, we have seen the offensive line play a little bit better since Jeff Saturday has taken over. I don't think there's any question about that. But, where would you look in particular at that offensive line? We've had conversations in the past about the left tackle, right guard. Do you feel like one of those is more likely to be a problem than the other tonight?
Well, it depends upon where Cam and TJ line up. If they're going to line up in their traditional TJ on the strong side, Cam on the weak side defensive tackle, then I would assume that it would be that specific right guard spot would be my biggest worry, because TJ doesn't just sit there, all the time. He loves to stunt. He'll move inside occasionally. He does a lot of stuff like that. And then, of course, if Cam ever does any stunts. The issue is that right guard position that we have, the guy there, he's good with his technique. He just doesn't have the upper body power to handle some of your power rush moves. And I'm sorry, but Cam Hayward is a guy who's got some serious, power rush moves. And if TJ's coming in on a stunt or something, he's got the running start already, which allows for that extra power move on the inside. So yes, that right guard position worries me a ton.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I mean, Cam Hayward is one of the strongest players in the NFL at this point. He always was. Starting to get that old man strength, So he's a tough out for sure. And Alex Highsmith on the left side, or the right side of the defense, but the left side of the line, that's something to watch out for as well. Especially if you're forcing double teams between like your center guard against Cam Hayward, then unless you're putting a tight end over there or like chipping nonstop with Jonathan Taylor, then that's a tough position. So a tough position to put your left tackle in. But it looks like Jonathan Taylor's healthy. He's looks like he's pretty much back to his old self. Something that worried a lot of people, like all times, maybe among an all-time start to a career, and then just a major drop off. Part of it was offensive line play, but he didn't look like himself. But he's kind of been back. How do you feel about Jonathan Taylor right now? Do you think that he's still fighting through anything, or do you feel like he's, as much as any NFL player 12 weeks through the season, that he's pretty much back to full health?
I mean, I still think that when you're dealing with an ankle injury, that's going to linger all year round. It's not something that's just going to heal overnight. Even with a week off or something of that nature, waiting on that week 14 bye will be a huge help for him. But right now, I do believe that he is hampered a little bit, not necessarily in his straight line speed because it is a high ankle. I believe it's more of a, side to side movement that he's got issues with. So yeah, that's, those hard one cut moves that he is so good, the one cut, then go. That's what's been hampering him all season. He's better now, but yeah, again, I don't think he's at 100% to what we saw last season. I think he's probably sitting at about 80, 85 probably.
Yeah, I would imagine that's probably pretty accurate. And, he's not going to be getting free holes through the defensive line, regardless of, the offensive line's version of holding up in this game is probably still going to be a challenge for Jonathan Taylor to run through either way. But, if you have a matchup on the outside, one of these receivers, where do you think that they might be able to get something done? I mean, which Steelers defensive back do you think that they might be able to potentially manhandle a little bit?
Ooh, that's a good question. I haven't actually looked at that quite 100%. Give me one moment. Let me get a good look at what their defensive back system looks like, because it really depends upon where Minkah is going to be sitting, right? Whether or not he's going to be, like traditionally over the top, protecting over the top. Because if that's the case, I wouldn't trust anyone going deep at that point, because Minkah has a knack for getting turnovers, especially against the Indianapolis Colts. Last few games we've had, he's had pick sixes. So that worries me quite a bit. In all honesty, though, I think one of the better positions that we might have, Paris Campbell's really had an excellent breakout season now that he's healthy. I think him versus Arthur Mollett might actually be the receiver cornerback matchup that I think favors the Indianapolis Colts the most in this game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could definitely see that as well, because Paris Campbell is kind of like is one of the guys that we've been waiting to break out, and I don't know if he's broken out per se, but he's definitely growing into a role, and he's a guy that's kind of finally saying, like, you look at him and what he's done this year, and you say, okay, this is a guy that has a future in the league, not a guy who's just going to finish a rookie contract and fade away. So he's definitely improving. And Arthur Mollett, he's a guy, obviously, he's bounced around. It's kind of crazy to me to see the overall investment that the Steelers have put at the corner position, because they spent a ton of money on Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then they've just kind of been like, all right, well, we'll just have a bunch of guys in there. I mean, Cam Sutton's probably their best player at corner, and he's fine. But, you got Arthur Millette, you got Akella Witherspoon, you got Levi Wallace as a backup. You trade for William Jackson, who hasn't been good and has now hurt as well. So it's like you're relying very, very much on your front and your superstar patrolling the back end. And that's worked for them to some degree. I think their losses this season have been more on the offense than defense, certainly. But it's a little star heavy. So this is a kind of game where if they lose somebody during the game, you know what I mean? Even for a short length of time, that will be an opportunity for the Colts to score some points. When you turn things on the other side and you look at the Steelers offense, you talked about how good the Colts defense is this year. But if you're looking specifically at matchups, where do you think is somewhere that the Colts could be a little bit susceptible? Certainly they have a very good corner in Stephon Gilmore, but if they have him on Deontay Johnson or George Pickens or whoever they decide to, how do you feel about the alternative matchup?
I actually like the matchups, Indianapolis Colts corners versus them. Now, it depends upon who's on the outside against Deontay Johnson, right? Because he's a burner. If we have our young guy, number 34, Isaiah Rodgers, who is also a burner, he's got the speed to keep up with Deontay. I think that matches up well. But here's the thing, okay? Yes, we do have Stephon Gilmore, but I don't see a superstar receiver. Yes, they have George Pickens, the young guy, but you call him a superstar yet? I don't think so. Not through the season. A lot of times they'll put Gilmore on a tight end if the tight end seems like a guy that could really take over a game. And he's done that incredibly well. He did that against Kansas City, right? And their superstar tight end. Look, I know Pat Freiermuth. Is it Muth?
Freiermuth, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Freiermuth, he's not necessarily a superstar, but he can absolutely get things done. He's a very solid tight end who can actually catch the ball and make things happen after the catch. I would be worried about that. Now, are you going to put Bobby Okereke on him, the linebacker who's decent in coverage, or are you going to lock him down? Because that's a big question. The Colts have 4 really good safeties on their roster. So that's a situation where I'm not worried about anything deep. Even with Deontay Johnson out there, I feel like we have very, very deep safety group right now, young at that. I mean, obviously my co-host, Rodney McLeod, he's the veteran of the group, but he also, he's more of a box safety, but he could play deep as well. He's got the experience and stuff. I would say if anything, it depends on where they put Stephon Gilmore. If they put him on Pat, then George Pickens would be the guy that I would go to the majority of the time if I was the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if not, then Deontay is probably the guy they could lean on, because even though the Colts cornerback Isaiah Rodgers has the speed, if Deontay can shake him with a move, he can be beat on good route running occasionally. So we'll see. It's definitely George Pickens or Deontay Johnson, depending upon where Stephon sits, though.
So, I mean, Isaiah Rodgers is a guy that we talked about a little bit before the season started, and I basically asked your opinion on, what he looks like as a starter opposite of a veteran, and your take was essentially what it is now. It's like he's got the speed, he's got recovery speed, so if it's not a perfectly thrown ball, he can get there, but he will get beaten on some solid route running. I think the matchup with Deontay Johnson certainly makes sense, but he is also more than just a burner. He's also a good route runner. He's one of the best slant to the house guys, because he gets you on the slant and then he's got the speed to keep running away from you. So that's something to keep an eye on. I do think from the Colts perspective, that matchup makes the most sense. And if I were the Colts, I would 100% put Stephon Gilmore on George Pickens, because he is, I think you're right about Pat Freiermuth being a guy that can help consistently move the chains, maybe in the red zone as well. he's a guy who could absolutely end the game with like 6 or 7 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. And that does hurt you. But I think Pickens can be way more impactful if you don't put your best guy on him, just because, he can be a possession guy. He can man up on guys and catch balls 10 yards at a time for 60, 80 yards, but also he can have that big play on you. You know what I mean? He can have a 60-yard reception that puts you around the goal line, or, he can go up and moss you for a touchdown as well. So even though he is less consistent, I would say a little bit less refined, he's been very good as a rookie, and I think he has a lot more devastation potential. So I would put Stephon Gilmore on him absolutely. And yeah, that might leave you susceptible to some Pat Freiermuth because he's developed into a good tight end too. But I would be more concerned about the outside, personally speaking. So
my biggest thought is if they get into short yardage situations like in the red zone, that's the area where I would be like, we got other big corners that could possibly take care of Pickens in that. I would want to make sure that Freiermuth is not at all a target in 4th and goal type situations. That's
who would you put out on the outside then? So you take Kenny, you'd basically go nickel with Kenny Moore off the field, put Stephon Gilmore over Freiermuth, and then who else would you put outside? Because Kenny Moore's probably not a good matchup for him. For Pickens.
Good Lord. The guy we got from the Raiders this past year has actually looked a lot better over the last. No, that's the guy we traded.
That's the sent you to the
we picked up a guy from the Raiders this past offseason as well. And
Brandon Faison.
Yes, Brandon Faison. And he's decent. He's not a terrible corner. Isaiah Rodgers has more big play capability. But Faison is, a guy that you can kind of lean on occasionally. The last couple of weeks, he's made some big plays against some receivers, especially in the Eagles game. And he's a bigger corner. He's tall. He's got long arms. He's a guy who could legitimately, fight someone for a 50-50 ball, at least a wide receiver. But he doesn't have the physicality to take on like tight ends and things of that nature. So, yeah, I think Faison would be the guy that I would put on him in the short yardage red zone areas in that situation if that's the route that I wanted to go.
Yeah, I think that's kind of something that you have in the bag, and then if it looks like Freiermuth is giving you a really hard time, you could pull that out. That's an interesting thought, and definitely not something I would have considered until we talked today. But I don't want to keep you too much longer, so we're coming up on the end. Let's pick the game. PlayAction Pools still has the Steelers at 2.5-point underdogs at the Colts. I'll let you go first, and I'll pick after. I picked yesterday. I got to decide if I want to change my pick at all as we come up closer on the actual game itself. But do you take the Colts to cover? Do you take the Steelers to cover but lose? Or do you think the Steelers outright win this game?
I think the Colts cover. I think this is a game, in all honesty, I could see this looking kind of like a Thursday night football game, as we talk about. I could see where offensively, if you put both teams together, they may not get 500 yards total offense together, but I still see some possibility of turnovers, scoring on defense on both sides, and it ends up being a little bit more high scoring than your regular Thursday night football games. But I think the Colts will cover at home. They've won 4 of their last 5 primetime games in the past year and a half. So they seem to step up in primetime games lately.
Yeah, I'm looking up right now who leads the league in turnovers, and it looks like it's the Colts and tied with the Saints if this is up to date. Let me see.
No, the Colts. Oh, you mean like giving the ball away? Yeah.
Okay, so I should have put NFL turnover leading teams defense. That would probably get me the stat that I'm actually looking for here, because I think that's going to have a lot to do with it. Because you look at these matchups, and without looking at the stats specifically, I see the Colts more as a like bend but don't break type of defense, and I see the Steelers a little bit more as a big play type defense, turning the ball over. I mean, we've seen TJ Watt not just with the strip sacks, but also these ridiculous interceptions. We know Mick Fitzpatrick is a all-star at creating turnovers as well, whether it's punching the ball out or intercepting it. So the question is, if this is a defensive battle, which team is going to create points from their defense? You know, you just alluded to it, but I'm just kind of wondering which team do I think is going to be better at that?
Yeah,
And
I would pick the Steelers.
so the Steelers, what might be better, but also they're facing the veteran quarterback. While the Colts might overall be slightly less efficient at that, but they are facing the rookie quarterback. So it's an interesting question, and I think I'll go with my gut, which is what I picked yesterday, and it's mostly just because I'm being given points. I'm going to take the Steelers to cover. It's just them taking points, or me getting points, and makes it a little bit more tempting. So I'll take the Steelers here. I think Mike Tomlin's team is rounding into shape down the stretch. TJ Watt coming back definitely makes a huge deal, and Fitzpatrick's back another week off of his injury. So I'm going to take the Steelers to cover here. Fortunately, I will get a point either way, whether they win or just barely cover, which I could also see. So sorry to disappoint the Colts fans out there. Sorry, Noah. I'm going to keep my pick from yesterday. And Lawrence, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And then if the Colts somehow get themselves into a playoff berth, which is not out of the realm of possibility at this point, because there are a couple spots out, but they have that built-in tie, which wins them the tiebreaker long-term over any other team that they have the same number of wins as. It's a tough battle, but if they win tonight, they will be 5-6-1, right? That puts them only 2 games back from the teams that are currently in 5th, 6th, and 7th place. So if they tie with either one of those teams and wins, they're automatically in because they have that tie from week 1 with the Texans. So in the long run, that might help them. But if we have them in the playoffs, we'll absolutely have you back on to preview the playoff game. And if not, I don't think there are any. Is there another Colts primetime game? Actually, now that I think about it, there is. Who is it? Is it against the?
We got two more. We got Cowboys Sunday night football and the Chargers on Monday night football.
Yeah, the Cowboys. That's crazy. The Colts have a lot of primetime games this year. See, I wasn't the only one who thought they were going to be good. But all right, so I guess we'll have you on a lot sooner than a potential playoff berth, because we'll definitely talk about them anytime they're in the primetime slot. All right. Thanks again, Lawrence. Please let everybody know where they can find you, your shows, your YouTube channel, your podcast, and of course, your social media as well.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Colts_law. You can check out BLEAV in Colts anywhere you listen to audio podcasts. And of course, my video stuff from BLEAV in Colts and my Colts Law stuff is on YouTube. Lawrence Owen. Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. All right. Big shout out to Noah Ashley, our producer. You can find him on Twitter at NoahAshtraySports. Couldn't do this without him. And we will be back this Thursday. I don't know what the conversational topic is going to be yet. Nick and I did a conversation on the GM of the Year candidates. So maybe it's time to do our conversation on who we are the least big fans of as far as the big chair there. So maybe that's what we'll do. And then, of course, we'll preview Thursday Night Football as well. All right. We will see you all this Thursday. This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.